to say that I don't care. I woke up screaming, fuck the world. Fuck the world.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get the paperwork, the enforcement. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is January 13th, 2016, and I'm coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada, here on this Wednesday night. We were supposed to be here tomorrow. Well, we were supposed to be here yesterday, sorry, but I had an issue, and we rescheduled yesterday. I keep saying tomorrow. Yesterday's show for Friday. So if you were interested in that show, we're going to talk all about the Making of a Murderer series as well as the injustice system, probably equally about both. So it's not going to be a show that the whole thing is about that series, but that series sets up a case that is a good example of what I think happens a lot. Now, maybe not to that extreme, because I actually think that anybody who's seen it, that a police officer actually killed the woman in question in the series. But we'll get into more details on that on Friday. But if you haven't seen it, I would watch it. It is an interesting series, and what happens, it's true, obviously, and it's crazy. You have a guy who is in jail for 18 years, gets out after they find out that he is innocent of the crime he's in jail for, and he never admits he maintains his innocence the whole time. And then what happens is he ends up back in jail, I think about 2 years later, for murder. So it's an interesting series. I would watch it. I saw it there, and at first I didn't watch it because I thought it had to do with murderers and whatnot. I didn't realize it had to do with the injustice, what I call the injustice system, more than a murder. I thought it was like a portrait of a murderer, because isn't making I think it's called Making of a Murderer. So I just assumed that it was like a profile on a murderer, but that's not what it was at all. So I assume they're gonna have, it's a series, and I assume they're going to have different cases each year. It wouldn't be hard to find them. There's a lot of people, too, that have been let out of jail due to DNA. And I remember hearing the first one, I think the guy's name was Randall. Either his last name was Randall or first name was Randall. And they made a documentary on it. And it was when I was probably like 10, I had seen this. And I'm thinking it was like it wasn't the Thin Blue Line. Maybe it was. Maybe the documentary had the same name as, because I know there's a movie. But anyway, it was the same type thing where somebody served 17 years in jail and then got out. So you have a lot of that as the DNA evidence progressed and the technology progressed, you had a lot of people getting out of jail. You also, on the other side, had people getting found out and going to jail years later because of DNA evidence as well. So it kind of worked both ways there. However, if you actually murder somebody or rape somebody, I think you deserve to be in jail. Now, I don't agree with the injustice system in America at all, and the way they treat people regardless of what they did and how the whole thing is set up. So yes, I agree they should be in jail, but I think things should be a lot different. But anyway, we'll talk all about that on Friday. But thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. And, of course, this week we'll be on Friday. And you can listen on Spreaker.com and NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com live. You can listen to the archives on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud immediately after the show. Now, all those are on our website, so I know I gave a whole list. So if you want to check different places where you can listen to the show, because maybe you have an account on SoundCloud and that's where you go to listen to everything, compared to, instead of, say, Spreaker, or you want to watch it on YouTube. And YouTube actually is the most helpful, best place to listen to it, because the more listens I get on YouTube and more subscribers, at some point I can maybe make some money off of that. But I'm pretty far down the line on that, because I just started posting to YouTube. I mean, before that, I posted a couple videos, but that was it, or the audio and just a picture. But now it's every show is now being automatically posted. So that's pretty cool. Spreaker is set up where it's posting automatically to a bunch of other websites, and Tumblr as well. But I can't figure that site out, but I haven't really gone into detail there. But we're also on there as well. And I'm trying to get my iTunes account back up. When I was on Blog Talk Radio, it uploaded to iTunes, and I should be able to do that now, but there's something going on with my iTunes account that I got to get straightened out. Also, I have archives on my website. Now, the goal was to post every single archive after the show, but that's something I have to do manually. I can't do automatically, or maybe I can set something up. I don't know. It'd be nice if I could, because what happened was I got behind and now I'm like months behind. So you do have archives there from like February to maybe April or something, but then you don't have after that. So at some point I want to just take a couple of days and just post all those, but I haven't been able to. Also on the website, I plan on doing, and I did one, and I posted the link on Facebook about Making of a Murderer, where I wrote an article. It's more of a blog. The articles that I write are more blog type articles, although it's written in the format of an article. It's more my opinion. So I consider it more of a blog than an article per se, just because with an article, I think it's more your or maybe an op-ed piece, I guess I'd say. Because with an article, it's more a statement of just the facts. And of course, there's facts in there, but it's my interpretation of the facts based on my opinion. So it's kind of like the show written. If you want to read an article about what I would say on the show, or it's not going to be exactly the same. I'm not going to be reading the articles on the show, but that's the kind of thing I'm going to do article wise. In the future, I do hope to have other people writing articles and posting those. but we'll see how that goes. So regarding the show, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, as well as exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent, by threat of force and violence. And tonight we're going to talk all about something that I just talked about literally almost a month ago, back to gun control. I feel like Piers Morgan, who had talked about gun control for about a month straight every fucking night when he was on. I'm glad he's gone, and I think he's in Britain. I know for a while he couldn't go back because he was being investigated for spying that he did, like spying, as a journalist. So I don't know what happened with that, because as far as I'm concerned, he's irrelevant anyway, and I don't follow that type of shit anyway. I mean, he was a gossip columnist, really, and he just totally attacked guns for whatever reason. He was on like a rampage where every night he wanted to attack guns. I haven't seen anybody. I don't even think Barack Obama is as bad as Piers Morgan when it comes to attacking guns. You don't see him every night, but the difference is, of course, that he has a lot more power, and he's able to approve legislation, write executive orders, although we'll talk about some of the executive orders that I believe are illegal based on the U.S.'s Constitution. And I always, when I say that, the Constitution, I mean, I could give a fuck about the Constitution, and I'll tell you why, and people that have listened to the show know why. Because it's a document that does not protect your freedom, and it does not protect your liberty. And so I always say, like, it doesn't go far enough. But it doesn't really matter, because, again, the point that I stress all the time is, how is a piece of paper going to protect your true freedom and liberty? Because as soon as you hand power over to somebody over you, they're going to violate it. They're going to do whatever they want. And obviously the Constitution has failed. So these people that say restore the republic, go back to the Constitution. Well, how did it fail? And I remember I've asked people this before. I haven't got many responses, but I remember I think I got one on the air, and the two people that I can think of that I got responses is, we need to educate the voters and let them know what's going on and all of that shit. So that was really what I got from them. But the other side of that is, okay, so you educate the voters and let them know what's going on. You're still going to have the same system. You're still going to have the same candidates. I don't think that would really do anything, to be honest, as far as affecting the outcomes of elections and who's in office. I don't think that would do anything. Now, I'm doing a similar thing, trying to educate people, but I'm not trying to educate people for the purpose of voting and who to vote for, or to get involved in the system. And that's the difference. So I'm not saying that you can't educate people, but the other thing is, they assume that the people that they would educate would want to vote for the same people. And that's not always going to be the case. There are people, unfortunately, there are a lot of them that have been brainwashed for so long that they are gone. And I'll give you an example of something that even this, and this is, I got to think of the best way to explain this, but background checks on guns, right? The majority of people think there should be background checks. I'm not sure of the year they started background checks. It may have been, was it with Nixon and his crime? It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't more than 40 years ago. Now I got to remember like where 40 years ago is and remember that it is 2016. But there was a long period where there were no I think it might have been in the 80s, to be honest, or the 70s. But if you talk to somebody now, the average person, and say you don't believe in background checks, they'd probably be shocked. Oh my God, we have to have background checks. So my point is, if you look at how the government has changed the opinion of people, the government and government media really, from something that didn't even exist to something that is recognized as necessary to people's way of life, in a sense. I mean, that's something that, well, they say with the polls that, 90% or something like that. And that to me is scary. How you can manipulate people into something that didn't even exist not that long ago. And people used to carry fucking guns on planes, and like I think that was more when planes first, commercial airlines first got big, and it wasn't a big deal. So you see how things change, and of course, they would say, well, things are more dangerous and all of this and that and whatever. And I think part of it is the government made them that way, if they are. And they are, but only in certain circumstances. And I mean that there's a small percentage of the population that is, because of them, they're able to drive all these laws. So what I mean is, there's a small percentage of the population that is so fucked up and does all these things with, guns and crimes and stuff like that, that they're what's driving the laws, because people are allowing 1% or less of the population or allowing politicians to create laws around 1% of the population, even if it's even that high. So that's crazy in itself. But before we get to that, as I always like to mix it up, I want to talk about a couple of articles I found just briefly of interest. Now, there was a guy who shot down a drone hovering over his yard. And I guess this was a commercial drone. It was like, like if I go and buy a drone and then my drone is over your yard. I don't know exactly. It doesn't say exactly how many feet, but that's what's weird. Let me check that again to see, because I'm thinking if it's like 2 feet, I mean, when I say 2 feet, I don't mean 2 feet above the ground, but I mean like 2 feet above like a wall or something, like 8 feet up or 6 feet up or something like that. That if you can fucking touch it, but this is what interested me in this article is the fact that, not that they're being sued for damaging the property, and it's not a criminal offense, although depending where you're at, they could charge you with discharging a firearm in a place you're not supposed to or something like that. but and that would be a criminal charge. But it's the damage to the drone. So it would be a civil case where I'm suing you because you damaged my drone. But what interested me about this article, which I think is fucked up, is that they show the guy with a shotgun. It says a Benelli M1 Super 90 shotgun. I've never heard of that. Oh, he shot it with bird shot too. 3 rounds of bird shot. So, it's not a big deal, but I mean, to me, but yeah, so these are, ones that somebody bought, and I think you should be able to buy drones. If the government, has access to these drones, you should be able to buy them, and you should be able to spy on the fucking government with them. But again, I can't find the actual how high it was, but the FAA says the government owns the sky, anything. And what was the exact quote? It was that when I read this, I just remember that the FAA basically says that they have jurisdiction to all of the air. So, but I guess the property owner owns at least as much space above the ground as he can occupy or use in connection with the land. So it would probably have to be maybe not that high. I mean, what can you say if it's a 2-story house or something? I would think it would have to be above the house, but maybe not. But they are saying, the government is saying that we own the air, we own the sky, whether it's over your house or not. And in a way that's kind of fucked up. Now, I guess the worry there would be, well, what if a commercial jetliner is flying over your property, which could very well be possible, and people obviously don't have the right to fucking shoot that down. But I look at that as more borrowing or sharing the sky than owning the sky. But that's obviously a point. But just the fact that they would say that they own, and I guess maybe you'll have to determine, like, okay, well, I own this much of it. And then it mentions, like a package. So if a drone's delivering a package to your neighbor, how far above your house do they have to be to deliver that package? I mean, helicopters are I see them flying. I've talked about this, that I see them flying in residential neighborhoods all the time. And what they're doing is they're fucking spying on people. I know you're saying, no, that's not what's going on. No, they're watching, just like their police helicopters. I hope they're police helicopters as opposed to like FBI or some kind of government helicopter. There is a line of, somebody had told me, of helicopters. And when I say line, like, you keep seeing them flying in this one kind of line, that it's for tours, because in Las Vegas they do helicopter tours and, tours of the Grand Canyon and shit like that. So those are fine. Those don't bother me. But the police helicopters, where they have cameras on them and they literally could see better than you, somebody that's 10 feet away or 5 feet away, or just as good as somebody that's right in front of you. I mean, they've showed the footage from these before. So if you got helicopter, I mean, there's just another violation of privacy there. And then with drones, they're cheaper and you don't need a pilot. So you can have the police get as many drones as they want to monitor every fucking neighborhood, essentially. I mean, I guess they need somebody to pilot it, but if they had it on some kind of autopilot where it just went, you know, and I'm sure this technology either exists now or will in the very near future, where it just, you know, flies a certain pattern and, you know, goes in a circle. Or it doesn't have to necessarily be a circle. I mean, it could be a square, but, you know, goes in the same pattern and just patrols and just, you know, keeps going in that same pattern and monitoring neighborhoods. And I don't think that's far away at all if they're not doing it already. But, you know, so what about those? You know, I would definitely, if they're fucking spying on my, you know, house or backyard or whatever, why not shoot those out of the sky? So I don't know how I really feel in this case where, you know, governments to me is totally different because they're, to me, violating privacy. So the privacy law, and I learned this like, I don't know, like 15 years ago or something. I was taking a law class, and when I was getting my MBA, there was like law for business or something. I don't know. And I noticed that they started putting cameras up on every single stoplight. At that point, they hadn't had it on all of them in Vegas. Now they do. But I noticed that's when they started putting them up around 2001. And I noticed that they were there. So I said to the teacher of the class, you know, isn't that invasion of privacy? And they said no, because what about expected privacy? But I don't expect the government to be watching everything I do. I understand the concept and the point, but the issue to me is still, I don't expect, well, I do expect it now, but I shouldn't have to expect the government videotaping what I'm doing. Now, I understand once you go outside that, and the positive to this is that people can film police and they can film what's going on outside. And contrary to what people believe, if you're in your front yard and someone wants to film you, they can film you. I mean, if you're outside, they don't need your permission. Now, I believe they would need your permission to make money off it, to use your image. But to just film it and then post it on YouTube or something, I don't think they need anybody's permission. With YouTube, even if you're making money, I don't know that they need your permission on YouTube. But if you're selling it to, you know, airing it on television or something like that, then they would need your permission to air it, or they could blur out your face. But public servants, I don't even think you need that, where you could, I believe, air it and make money off it, but I'm not sure. But yeah, you have the right to film anybody that's in public. So there's a positive there, but the government has far too much of an advantage and far too many cameras watching you, and they can be used against you. Now, that was the whole thing that kind of came up in that conversation, and this was like 15 years ago, was, well, or maybe a little less than that, maybe like 14 years ago, but, well, you know, what are they using it for, did, I believe, come up, and how they use it. But in general, it's all about expectation of privacy. So I think the same thing would apply to a drone. It's about expectation of privacy. So if you're in your yard, I mean, how high does if you have a fence or a wall, say you have a brick wall, how high does your wall have to be because without a cover on it, you can't protect against a drone. So if somebody wants to go outside in their yard, if a woman wants to sunbathe naked and she has walls up, so she assumes, hey, I built a fucking wall, is now, I guess you couldn't sunbathe, because I was going to say you'd have to build a roof on those walls, and maybe if it was something where like a tinted thing but the sun came in, I don't know. So I don't know what my feelings are on drones, but I do believe that, you know, I have the right to take a drone and follow around a fucking police car and follow them and see if they're doing anything bad. And it's the same technology, so they wouldn't even fucking know, because if it's like 50 feet up in the air and I have a real good one that has a camera that will zoom in enough, the only issue I think is sound, but I'm sure they're developing, and I don't know on the real sophisticated ones if they already have that already, because if you think about it, it would have to kind of filter the sound where you wouldn't want something close being too loud, but you'd want to be able to hear what's, 50 feet away going down. So a lot of stuff with drones, but, I guess in this case, the drone was $1,500 and he wants that repaid, but you really shouldn't be fucking around in people's yards, I would say. So, I don't know, that might be, to me, your loss. I don't know. Again, it doesn't say how close, but if it's close enough where it's sitting there watching you in your backyard, but then again, expectation of privacy. But most people have an expectation of privacy in their yard if it is not open. If it is fenced, then you would have an expectation of privacy. So that's really all I got to say about that. Not as as interesting a conversation as I thought it was going to be. Well, not really a conversation, but I mean, drones are something that they're going to continue to get. The technology is going to continue to get better, and people are going to have these things, and you're not going to be able to hide everything. Now, again, the positive side of it is that the government's not going to be able to hide anything. So that's a positive side, definitely. But you're going to have no privacy from the government, because they're going to have drones flying all around watching people. And that's where I look at that as an issue, and I don't know how you handle something like that. So the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly before we get into guns and these executive orders that Obama, I don't know if he actually signed them yet or said this is what I'm going to do. I'm not 100% clear on that. But anyway, there's actually a couple things. Is the State of the Union. So State of the Union, of course, he brings up, guns, but he brings up more about the future and the country changing and what it's going to be like in 10 years and 20 years. And one, you're not going to be president. I'm sure he cares. I guess. I mean, really, why would he care with respect to he's not going to live the life of a normal person, and neither is anybody in his immediate family. I mean, they're going to have Secret Service. They were talking today on Glenn Beck. I happened to listen when I was driving to work this morning, and they were talking about how now the president is set for life after they get out of office, which is true. I mean, well, first of all, if they actually wanted to get a fucking job, which why would you? But if they wanted to get a job, they could too. I mean, they could get, that's what happens to senators and representatives. They end up in these executive positions because of what they did for lobbyists at various companies. And it's happened. Look at Cheney was the head of Halliburton. And Dick Cheney, from what I know about him, is his only experience outside of government was in education, that he was a college professor. So I don't know what gave him experience to run a company, honestly, where he got, that experience. But anyway, I think if you're in that position, if you're running a company, a big company, like a big corporation, and you're a CEO, you're not really doing that much. And I don't mean that in the sense of you don't do anything, but I think you hire the best people to do the majority of the work because you don't have time to do all that anyway. You're more kind of like the president. I mean, you're a manager of people, but do you really have the time to get into all this detail of stuff? I would say no. So maybe that's why. But anyway, if the president wanted to get a job somewhere and be the head of a company, I don't think he'd have any problem. But the whole point being is that he can basically do anything and make money. He can write a book. He can do a speech for, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or speeches, do a speech tour like Clinton does all the time. They'll pay him $200,000 to appear somewhere. Somebody they had actually mentioned as well, like Bush, you don't really see too much. And that's kind of true, but he's in the father too. But they already had money before they were in office. Obama didn't really have that much money. I guess he made something like $5 million off his book. So, I mean, compared to the average person, he had money. But, I mean, the Bushes have, from what I understand, billions in oil and things like that. I mean, they owned a baseball team at one point. So they don't really need money, but either way, there's just, you also get a pension anyway. So if you're pretty much set for life as a president, you could probably charge for autographs and taking pictures if you wanted to be fucked up like that. But yeah, you could just write books and say, I'm going to write books and they'll all be bestsellers, and the companies will pay you, who knows how much, or you could be a consultant, or you can sit on the board of companies. I'm sure they'd love a former president to sit on the board of any company for that matter, because there's information that they can give that you can't get from anybody else, not to mention all the relationships they probably have. So that's really why they get in there, because they still have all these relationships and stuff like that. So, but going back to my point of the State of the Union, that he was talking about the future and the things changing, and I know it's his last State of the Union, but it was, and I had only listened to it because of the show. I mean, there's certain things that I'll listen to because of the show. Otherwise, I really don't care. And it's not maybe that's not the right word. It's not that I don't care. It's that a lot of it is just bullshit. And sometimes I feel like I don't, I used to read a lot. I mean, recently, before I started doing the show, but I would read stuff that was more from people that were alternative, would be considered alternative authors, like Jim Mars and what's his name, John Whitehead, and people like that. And the what's his name, who wrote the book on the Federal Reserve? I can't think of his name right now, but I would read stuff like that. Or I would read propaganda bullshit just to see how much propaganda was in it. Like I read a book, Lone Wolf Terrorism, and it happened to be affiliated with one of those, what do you call it, agencies or whatever that the government consults with, or groups. It was the something group that the government consults with. So you know it was a bunch of bullshit. And just from reading it, I could tell exactly what they were trying to do in that book. So I feel like I need to know what's going on to a certain point. There's some people that are on the radio on, much bigger than me. I'm just, on the internet and small and whatever. But on actual radio that sound proud that they don't know what the fuck is going on. So I feel like I should know to a point, but at the same time, I want to avoid pop culture as much as possible because I don't want to be influenced by it. So I watch TV, but I had stopped for a while and mostly read and listened to radio. But I watch TV, but only movies. And then if I watch TV shows, it's always cable shows or shows on Netflix or Amazon or things like that, where you'll never see me watching a show on NBC or one of the major networks, because that's just too... I try to avoid watching them altogether. The only reason you'll see me watching them is because there's a college football or NFL game or something like that. But besides that, you won't see me watching those, because I think even with some of them, the commercials are more dangerous than the fucking show. And I mean that in a brainwashing sense. But it's just... there's so many things that you don't even realize, and that I realize more than I think the majority of people, but I'm looking for it. But there's things that I don't even see, and subconsciously they're probably absorbed, and I need to be careful about that, because it's not just about questioning government. It's so much deeper than that. It's the whole system. It's the whole way of life. It's the getting up every day, working for a corporation, getting married, having kids, white picket fence, the whole so-called American dream, all of that stuff. I mean, it all goes a lot deeper than I think most people go. That there's things that since you were little that have been kind of programmed into your mind, and some people can't get away from them. And I'm not saying that that can't be something that you do, or if you do that means that you've been brainwashed. I mean, like getting married and having kids, it might be something that you actually legitimately want to do. But I think there's plenty of people that do it because it's expected of them. that they reach a certain age, it's like, okay, I'm supposed to do this, where maybe they wouldn't do it. And you see 50% of marriages ending in divorce. You see a lot of kids where the fathers ain't around. I mean, there's a reason for that. And it's not, it's not always because there's just problems between people. It's also because maybe they never wanted those things in the first place, but they went through with what they felt they were supposed to do. It's just like you have a certain amount of gay people that end up getting married and having kids because they stayed in the closet because they were scared to come out. And it's the same type of concept in that they did what was expected of them. They didn't want people to know. And that's a shame. So that's why, I mean, it's good that people are more accepted for, if that's who you are, then, you know, that's fine. That's who you are. Don't waste your life being unhappy and ruining somebody else's at the same time. I mean, I don't blame them, but, you know, the spouse's life and the kid's life, and I don't know if the kid's life gets totally ruined, but it's worse for them because they thought one thing and it was really another thing, you know, and then you go through a divorce and all that. And, you know, so things like that. I know that has nothing to do with the State of the Union, but really all I remember, it wasn't really anything, you know, just his main stuff that he wants to do with guns and inequality and raise minimum wage and all the same shit that he's just been saying. And then, you know, that he says, well, I'm not talking about, you know, just this year. I'm talking about 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. Yeah. And I think what's going to happen, and maybe he even knows this. I mean, what the plan is for him to hand off to the next person and for them to continue the work that is going towards the government controlling every aspect of your life. And that's really, in my mind, and I've, you know, said this plenty of times, that's really, in my mind, what the whole goal is. So just one more thing I wanted to mention, because I can't fucking stand this guy. Michael Savage, I guess, won at the U.S. Supreme Court, where I guess he lost in the lower courts. It had something to do with an issue with his syndicator, and he got like $800,000 out of it or something, and got out of his contract without getting screwed over. So I guess that's a positive thing. At least it sounded like it. I didn't totally understand. But Michael Savage is a fucking douchebag. This is one of those guys, again, that talk about, you know, first of all, he calls his people, he's like the Savage Nation, like he's some big important guy, and he sounds like a dick. And even the way he talks, he's another one of those guys like Mark Levin, sort of. I would compare him to Mark Levin. And I don't get why people want to fucking listen to these guys. I really don't. I'm not saying that I'm sitting here so great or anything. I'm not at all. But I don't get why you'd want to listen to Michael Savage unless, you know, where I'll occasionally listen just to fucking yell at the radio just to see what bullshit. It's like the train wreck. And there's a couple people. One, a local person that not local here, but, you know, a smaller and more independent person on YouTube that I'll occasionally listen to, not because I'm a fan, but because to me it's like a train wreck. And I don't I'm not a fan of train wrecks, but I want to hear the bullshit that these people are putting out there. So that's why I used to listen to Serious Progressive, because the shit that they were putting out there is crazy. And I would look at that also as this is really where they want to take the country, meaning that the powers that be, of course, not for themselves. They want to keep all the money and all this shit for themselves, but they want to control the rest of the population, and that's how they do it. So speaking of controlling the rest of the population, of course, all leaders have done this from the beginning, have always taken away guns. And we all know that. It's not a secret. And I want to point out something before we start getting into all this, that first of all, Obama did a town hall with CNN for like an hour, and I had listened to that to prepare for the show. And one of the things that he had said in this town hall really shows why people are scared. Because he goes, of course, and says, no, we don't want to take your guns. We just want, just this. But then he even kind of says, well, we got to take one thing at a time. Or in the past, like, oh, people wouldn't go for this, but we would push for this, but people wouldn't go for it. But he responded to something by saying, well, we could make things less lethal. So you can look at that in two ways. You can look at that as getting rid of rifles or just getting rid of guns altogether, because I know he's not an expert in guns, but probably I would think, and I know you can shoot a lot more people, but maybe not, because I'm thinking, you can get a 45 probably with an 18 shot magazine, because I have a 40 caliber Glock with a 18, or I know somebody who has a 40 caliber Glock with an 18 round magazine. So you can buy two of those, and then there you go. So it's not just, because I was going to say he was talking about rifles, like something like AR-15s. But I would think if you get hit with an AR-15 bullet, now I know it's shaped totally differently, where you have like the point and how it would go. I'm just thinking how it would go in, and I'm not an expert on that, but I've read about, the difference between the hollow points and regular bullets, but not what I would think of 40 caliber or a 45 would do a lot more damage. So if you had two 45s with magazines, 18 round magazines, compared to having an AR-15 with a 30 round magazine that you have to reload on, but you only have one, gun there, I would think either way, they're just as deadly. So him talking about that, and nobody questioned him on it, but to me got to the, okay, well, I really want to do more than this, but this is really all I can do, and all America will agree to. And ultimately, yes, I do want to take your guns. And I think he had said that before years ago. However, he didn't say anything about it before he got elected for the second term. From what I recall, he kind of kept that quiet. And then after Newtown is when he came out, about the background, not just background checks, but I know at least members of Congress came out about, of course, banning AR-15s and reintroducing the assault weapons ban, even though there's no such things as assault weapons, and that they were trying to implement that. And I even had heard that they wanted to do it in a way where there's no the guns that you already have, that there's no grandfathering in. That's what I was looking for. And Anderson Cooper actually did a good job with this, where he said, can you really blame people? Because you had praised Australia and what they've done, and it's pretty hard to get a gun in Australia as well. So we know that that's pretty much what he wants to do, to maybe not have it where guns are totally banned, but pretty close. And maybe all you can get is like, you know, a one-shot rifle or something, or a double-barrel shotgun or something like that, where you cannot really get much else or anything that's semi-automatic. But I'm going to play this clip where a sheriff, and this is the other thing, these fucking sheriffs, man, and the police in general, they say that, well, of course, I wouldn't let this happen. You know, in my town, I'd protect people's rights to carry a gun and all of this shit. And they say that, but I think it's a lot of bullshit. I really do. They did the same thing here, where they had, they even actually said it to me when they had searched my car and my gun was there. And then one time I got pulled over, and for some reason I told them I had my gun because I didn't, everything was legal, but, you know, and he gave it back to me and whatever. And then they say, oh, we support the Second Amendment and whatever. And I don't believe the sheriff at the time, or probably the sheriff now, because he's like a clone of the other sheriff. I don't believe either of them support, you know, the Second Amendment and want people to be carrying guns. I really don't. Maybe some of these sheriffs do, but I don't think they're gonna go against. There may be some, or one or two, but the way they react to other things, it totally cancels that out too, because they want credit, and then people will applaud them like, oh, that's great. But then look at the other shit that they do, and it's crazy. So it's like, you expect me to believe the same fucking people that, you know, arrest somebody for having a joint or something, or for possessing drugs, for choosing to put what they want in their body, will say, oh, well, it's okay for you to have a gun. I don't care what the federal government says. Even though I could get in trouble, I really don't care. So I don't tend to believe that. Anyway, there was a sheriff at the town hall, and this is where Obama started talking about in China where 20 people were stabbed or something. And this might be a different, because I thought the 20 people that were stabbed in China, most of them were killed now. And he's saying they weren't. But what he does say is maybe we can do something to make them less lethal, comparing them to knives. So it's like he's kind of saying that, yeah, we don't want certain types of guns, or maybe we don't want certain calibers, or at least at minimum, he's saying that we don't want semi-automatic rifles. So I'm going to play that real quick, and then we will be right back. I got to make sure I find the right one, because I got a whole bunch here. Okay, I think it's this one. So I'm going to play that, and we'll be right back. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com. Oh, and if you'd like to call in and comment, you can Skype in, username NonpartisanLibertyForAll. just send a contact request and your name and where you're calling from and what you want to talk about. Or you can call in 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. So you can call in, and it'd be best if you could text first with your name and where you're calling from, so that I don't have to screen the call and what you want to talk about, and then we'll bring you on the air. And you can get all that information on nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, the website as well. If you forget the number or the Skype name or any of that, you can go there and get that information. So here's it sounds like the way the guy's name, the sheriff, is spelled Sheriff Babu, but then maybe that is his name because it's Babeu. Hey, Babu, we're getting some picnic baskets. So we'll be right back after this.
Sheriff Paul Babu of Pinal County, Arizona.
It's Babu.
For Congress.
Sorry, it's Babu. I like Babu. I think it's better. Sorry about that. So here you go.
Sheriff Paul Babu of Pinal County, Arizona. He's a Republican running for Congress after the recent terror attacks. Sheriff, I know you've been telling citizens to arm themselves to protect their families. What's your question to the president?
Well, first, deputies...
That's the other thing I want to mention is, and I have this in my notes, is that they're telling you how dangerous it is. So government media, politicians, oh, there's terrorism, there's this, there's that. So they tell you how dangerous it is. But then on the other side, they don't want you to be able to protect yourself. So it makes no sense. They want you to wait for the police or wait for whoever, any government agency. Because essentially the other thing that I've been bringing up for a long time is every government agency is essentially armed or has an armed department. So they're arming them to the teeth. And you look at how they're arming the police with tanks and this and that. And nobody, of course, asks those questions like, hey, look what you're doing with the police. Look what you're doing with this. And there was some idiot, and I fucking flipped out when this had happened. And I don't know if I had my show at the time, but I had posted her name and everything. She was the head, Nina Tardin or something. She was the head of one of those liberal groups or whatever they are. And she had said on Bill Maher, that on Bill Maher, they said that something about the police killing people and militarizing. And her answer was, oh, that's because so many people have guns. Even though the fucking bitch didn't look at the statistics of crime and murder and homicides going down in the past, over 20 years, they've been going down. And then she makes a fucking ignorant statement like this. And she's president of this organization. So obviously they, made a mistake there. But there's more than just her who said that. I've heard that before. That, oh, well, that's why they're arming with this because the people have so many guns. Well, really, because, again, you look at the amount of police who've gotten murdered has went down. You look at homicides in general have went down. So making asinine comments that are just not based in fact are ignorant, especially when you're supposed to be president of this organization. And I cannot remember the name of the organization because this was probably, if it was before the show, it was over 2 years ago. So I just wanted to mention that. So back to the clip.
Slow response time has been mentioned a couple of times. I want to be clear that my deputies have a very fast emergency response.
I'm sure that's true.
Yes. Mr. President, you've said you've been frustrated by Congress. As a sheriff, I oftentimes get frustrated, but I don't make the laws. And I've sworn an oath to enforce the law, to uphold the Constitution, same oath you've taken. Mm-hmm. And the talk and why we're here is all these mass shootings. And yet you've said in your executive action, it wouldn't have solved even one of these or the terrorist attack. Well,
I didn't say that it
Looking
wouldn't
at the
solve one.
information, what would it have solved? Now, knowing...
None of the recent mass shootings, I should point out, none of the guns were purchased from an unlicensed dealer.
Correct. And that's what I'm speaking to, the executive action that you mentioned earlier, aspirin, toys or cars. They're not written about in the Constitution. I want to know, and I think all of us really want to get to the solution, and you said don't talk past each other. What would you have done to prevent these mass shootings and the terrorist attack? And how do we get those with mental illness and criminals? That's the real problem here. How are we going to get them to follow the laws?
Well, first of all, appreciate your service. Good luck on your race. You sure you want to go to Congress?
I don't want to.
I'm sure that's true. That'll hurt you. Yeah, and I'm sure it's a Republican district. Look, crime is always going to be with us. So I think it's really important for us not to suggest that if we can't solve every crime, we shouldn't try to solve any crimes. And the problem when we talk about that guns don't kill people, people kill people, or it's primarily a mental health problem, or it's a criminal and evil problem, and that's what we have to get at. All of us are interested in fighting crime. I'm very proud of the fact that violent crime rates have continued to go down during the course of my presidency. I've got an attorney general, an FBI, that works very closely with local law enforcement in busting up crime rings all the time. That's a huge priority to us. And we're probably providing grants to your department to help go after criminals. The challenge we have is that in many instances, you don't know ahead of time who's going to be the criminal. It's not as if criminals walk around with a label saying, I'm a criminal. And, by the way, the young man who killed those kids in Newtown, he didn't have a criminal record, and so we didn't know ahead of time necessarily that he was going to do something like that. But he was able to have access to an arsenal that allowed him in very short order to kill an entire classroom of small children. And so the question then becomes, are there ways for us, since we can't identify that person all the time, are there ways for us to make it less lethal when something like that happens? And I mentioned this during my speech at the White House a couple of days ago. Right around the time of Newtown in China, a guy who was obviously similarly deranged had a knife and started attacking a bunch of school children. About the same number were cut or stabbed by this guy. But most of them survived. And the reason was because he wasn't yielding a semi-automatic. So the main point I think that I want to make here is that everybody here is in favor of going after criminals, locking them up, making sure that we're creating an environment where kids don't turn into criminals, and providing the support that they need. Those are all important things. Nobody's saying we need to be going soft on criminals. What we do have to make sure of is that we don't make it so easy for them to have access to deadly weapons. In neighborhoods like Chicago, but I keep on using Chicago, this is all across the country. You go into any neighborhood. It used to be that parents would see some kids messing around on the corner, and they'd say, yo, even if they weren't the parent of those children, go back inside. Stop doing that. And over time, it was a lot harder to discipline somebody else's kid and have the community maintain order or talk to police officers if somebody's doing something wrong, because now somebody is worried about getting shot. And if we can create an environment that's just a little bit safer, in those communities, that will help. And if it doesn't infringe on your Second Amendment rights, and it doesn't infringe on your Second Amendment rights, and you're still able to get a firearm for your protection, why wouldn't we want to do that?
We got to take a break.
You are listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with your host, Dave Bourne. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
So we are back. But so when you listen to that and you hear him talk about the stabbings and making things less lethal. Now, first of all, in the case that he was talking about, if you go by the official story, which I don't know that I believe the official story. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think it happened or the kids didn't die or whatever. I'm just saying that I don't know that I believe the official story. There are a bunch of reasons why. We don't need to get into those right now, but I've mentioned there was a investigator that was his job to investigate school security. He was a former cop. He tried to investigate that, and he was threatened by police and a whole big thing. So, but let's assume that whatever they say happened. And they said that he took the guns, the kid who killed the kids in Newtown, and he was about 19 or 20, something like that he took the guns that were legally purchased by his mother. So what in this case that he proposed would change anything? And of course nothing, because they were legally purchased. There was a background check done there. Now, then he brings up China and a bunch of stabbings and talks about it being less lethal. So obviously he's talking one of two things. One, getting rid of guns altogether, or two, getting rid of, he mentioned semi-automatic. So it's almost like getting rid of semi-automatic guns. I don't even think that he knows what it is. I mean, maybe he does, but what a semi-automatic gun is, and what it is each time you pull the trigger, and you can keep pulling the trigger until all the bullets from the magazine have been shot. That's semi-automatic. And automatic is you just pull back the trigger, hold it back, and it just keeps firing bullets. Same thing until the magazine is empty. And I don't even know what it would be called because I don't have any, but like a single shot, or the rifles, like the old rifles where you got to recock it or something to shoot it. So there's rifles that, or, a shotgun, I guess, is similar to that, because a shotgun's not semi-automatic. You got to pump it each time you fire something off, but it's designed to be able to do it real quick. But you have rifles that I think you can have magazines in them, but you still need to do something in order for them to fire another bullet. I'm not too much into those type of guns, so I don't know a lot about them. And then, of course, you have single shot where, you got to keep reloading a bullet into it. But I think you do have magazine where it's non-semi-automatic, but it has a magazine. I think those do exist, but you have to do some sort of the equivalent of cocking it or something like that. So from what he said, I mean, I don't know if people missed that or what, but obviously he is thinking about either bans on quote unquote assault rifles, which again don't exist. I hate when people use those words. The word assault rifle is a word that was created by the government to, and it differs in every state, to essentially determine what was a bannable gun and what was not. And what they would do is the logic was ridiculous, because you had people that know nothing about guns saying that, well, if it has this kind of grip here and it has this and it has that. And then you can take a regular rifle, a semi-automatic rifle, and it's essentially the same thing. It just doesn't look as scary. So you could take an AR-15, and then there are other rifles, I think like an M4. Like if you take an M4, that's, I think it's just as, because I think M4s take the same, the 5.6 millimeter or the 223, I believe, but they're just designed differently, but they would still do the same damage. So, and they did that on there was a gun show where basically what they did was they did that, where they took something that would be illegal under the assault weapons ban and it wouldn't. And it's essentially the same thing. I mean, all those grips and all that stuff, yeah, I guess it helps or is helpful, but I mean, that's more if you're, I guess, fighting in a war or something. But I mean, is it really, I mean, how much? It looks cool and everything, but I think that's really what it does, is it looks intimidating, which is good for the person who has it if they're trying to defend themselves. But that's what they did with the original, the federal assault rifles ban. Now, they have assault rifles bans in states that don't have the exact same criteria or definition of an assault rifle. So there is no such thing as a fucking assault rifle, because it's just the government naming certain items that if it has this, and this, if it has one or two, or, you know, something like that, where if it has two or more of these characteristics, and that's how they did it. And it's ridiculous, because there's really no difference. There's not much of a difference. The difference is going to be now between semi-automatic and automatic. Okay, that's the difference. But to me, I would call an AR-15 a semi-automatic rifle, because that's what it is. With I think the standard magazine is a 30-round magazine. So that's what I would call an AR-15, or even an AK-47. I would call a semi-automatic rifle, or you could call it a military grade. Although I don't know what militaries use AR-15. I'm not AR-15s. Because essentially the U.S. military uses M16s, which I think are closer to AR-15s. They're just automatic as opposed to semi-automatic. But there's no such thing as an assault rifle. They love the assault, like you're going out on an assault, and then that's what they name it, because they're a bunch of fuckers that work for the government. There was that lady in Colorado that was a state senator or state whatever their other, because like here we have the assembly. Some of them actually have a House of Representatives in their state government. So whichever they had, she was one of those. And she thought, I believe, that the magazines, once you use them, they're all done. Like, you can't use them again. So you can get rid of the 30-round magazines just by people using them up, I think. I believe that's what she said. So you have people that are not experts, that really don't know anything about this. there's still the fact that more people are killed by handguns than rifles. It's actually very low, the amount of people killed by rifles. And according to Obama himself, I believe he said in 2014, 8,000 people were killed by homicides by gun, and 2/3 were by suicide. Not of that 8,000. If you get rid of that 8,000, it's like 30 something. And I know they love to count suicides and say that, yes, it's more definite, although there's been people that have tried to kill themselves by gun and they haven't been successful, and that's really bad. I'd rather use some other form where I'm not permanently damaged, but it's worse to survive a gun suicide probably than some other suicide. But suicide is not something that banning guns are gonna stop, or I realize that there are other ways to commit suicide that are harder, but there's easy ways too, where you go in your garage and turn on the fucking, let the car run. And personally, I'd rather do that than shoot myself, just in case I fuck it up. But the point being that suicides, one, I would say that it's a person's right to kill themselves, although I would hate to see young people kill themselves. And what I mean by that is, if you're terminally ill and you want to shoot yourself, I have no problem with that. The people that are going through serious pain, that have cancer or have something else, or a serious disease that there's no other way to live a normal life. But teenagers that are getting guns and shooting themselves with them is sad. But if they didn't have the gun, then I'm sure they'd figure out another way. I mean, they could get drugs just as easily and do it that way, and that way is probably not as painful and is a lot easier to do, because you think about shooting yourself, depending on the caliber of the gun, there's recoil and stuff like that, and I wouldn't if I was going to kill myself, and I wouldn't kill myself, but I wouldn't do it with a gun just because of the reliability of, I heard of a police officer who tried to kill himself and put the gun to the side of his head, which was stupid. And the recoil hit him in the jaw and he lived and blew his jaw off. I mean, you probably don't want to do that. But anyway, to count suicides, I think is unfair. But you would think that guns are running around killing themselves the way that people talk about them. There is some self-responsibility for the people that are pulling the trigger of these guns that are killing people. Guns don't walk around killing people themselves. And as far as the people selling them the guns having some responsibility, I think that is such bullshit. And the same with drugs. I don't think there's a responsibility in that. If you sell somebody drugs or you sell somebody a gun, what they choose to do with it is totally up to them. Now, of course, a gun has a lot of positive uses. Drugs, depending on the drug, may or may not have positive uses, but if you, I guess it depends on the drug. If it's like marijuana or something like that, there's a big difference between crystal meth or heroin or whatnot. But still, at the same time, it's their choice to do that. It's their body, and they have the choice to do what they want with it. Now, I think somebody like President Obama, who went and did drugs himself, admittedly would say that, obviously, because he's not doing anything really. I know he let some people in federal prison, some nonviolent people supposedly, out early, but I don't see him focusing. I didn't hear him say anything about drug laws in the State of the Union. Now, I heard him say about an epidemic of heroin. I believe he mentioned that, and people abusing drugs, but not anything about going more towards legalization and things along those lines. But so according to him, because I thought it was more, if there's 8,000 homicides by gun, now according to 3 different other sources, one is, and this is really hard to determine, because how do you get this information? And police or the FBI, of course, they don't want to put this information together, just like they didn't want to track how many cops killed people. So this is something that you'd somehow have to track by searching for any articles about if there's even an article about it. But one article, it says guns save 2,191 lives each day, which would be about 600,000? Do I have that right? I'm just taking 300 times 2,000. So it would be more than that, but around 300,000, 600,000, a little more than that, or would it be 6 million? Yeah. So another site is 500,000, and one of them is 2.5 million. So let's even take the lowest on that. Let's take 500,000. So at 500,000, and to me that sounds like a reasonable number, because if you look at all the crimes I should have brought up the FBI crime statistics, but I don't even know if they'd count that as a crime and how they count that, because again, it's not something they want you to know about. So even if we take 500,000, so if you have 500,000 lives that are saved, and even lower, I mean, you have 100,000 lives that are saved, and you have 8,000 people that are killed, I mean, that's huge. So that is never brought up. Now, in the town hall, of course, Obama brings up, well, usually what happens is the perpetrator gets the gun and then, uses it against them. And he tries to deny any positive side of guns. And I think I have a clip of that as well. I may have a clip of that. I may not have downloaded that one. But there was a woman who I guess was raped and had brought up, well, if she had a gun. And of course he had said that, well, he could have took the gun from you and shot you with it. And he also had said that there's definite correlation between people having guns and trying to protect themselves and them getting killed, and didn't recognize at all anybody being able to protect themselves or anyone saving their life because of a gun. And what he's failing to recognize at the same time is that you don't have to necessarily pull the trigger to save your life with a gun. Now, if someone breaks into your house or if someone's going to attack you and you pull a gun and that person doesn't have one, the majority of people will back off because they don't know, especially if they don't know who you are, because they don't know if you're going to shoot them or not. And depending on the state you're in, they may know that, okay, you totally have the right to shoot them. So in Nevada, yeah, if somebody broke in my house, I would honestly try to avoid shooting them, but I would definitely go to a gun if there was somebody who broke in my house. And if I saw that there was something in their hand, I would, shoot them. I would try to avoid it. I've talked about this before, that I would feel bad, but it would be an unfortunate situation, but I wouldn't feel like I did something wrong. But on one side, you can't look at how many people were killed by guns and then totally ignore the amount of people that were saved by guns. And obviously, and this is where it's fucked up, because obviously people are saved by the police, right? And I'm sure he would, well, actually, I don't think they are, but he would probably say that they are, because I think by the time the police get there, it's over. And it usually is. But he would say, he obviously would say that people are saved by the police. And why? How are they saved by the police? Well, with guns. Now, the first thing I actually wanted to say that I haven't got a chance to is that the stats to me are irrelevant, to be honest. Now, I think the statistics, for them, if anything, point in the direction of guns, that they support the possession and the use of guns, if anything. If you want to say, well, because in certain circumstances, I guess there's no correlation. Like you could say, well, this state has more guns and crime is lower, but this state has more guns and crime is higher. But I think the majority of states it's lower, but I think there is some where it's higher. But there may be other factors to that. So if you want to say there's no correlation, that's fine. But it looks like overall that it would be, if you said, look at the statistics, that it's in favor of guns, then not in favor of guns. When you're talking about what's better based on statistics, what's better for society, what's better for people, what's better for saving lives. Obviously, when police go everywhere, what do they have? They have a gun. They pull a gun. They've killed, last year, I believe they killed 1,100 people. So they are using guns and this whole good guy to stop the bad guy. Well, what do you think the whole idea is supposedly supposed to be with the police? The problem with the police is, one, they kill innocent people all the time, probably more than they kill guilty people, and they have too much power, and there's plenty of issues with the police that we've talked about on the show. Now, when it comes to, plus they don't get there in time. I'm sorry. And even if you support the police, which I don't think the police should exist. And I've talked about why before. But even if you support the police, they're not going to get there in time. If the police stop a crime, it's by accident or luck, usually. Or they're doing something illegal in the first place, and they're following somebody or stalking out, surveilling somebody that they didn't have permission to surveil, or something along those lines. So usually police are not going to get there in time. I mean, think about it. By the time you even realize someone's in your house, they probably have a gun pointed at you. And even if you can call 911 and a cop could get there in 2 minutes, which is not, it's not even going to happen. I mean, you'll be dead in 2 minutes. So that I don't even put on the police, to be honest. I mean, and many times I do, just because I think response times are terrible. And it's usually, they say they need more officers, but then it takes like 10 officers to arrest somebody that had like a DUI or something, or had a joint. You know, it's ridiculous. You see them talking, you're sitting there talking the whole time. They take so much time to do stuff. If that was or if somebody could look at the police and actually analyze processes, they could probably cut so much out of there, where they could probably even cut out a bunch of officers and save a lot of money. But I don't think anyone's allowed to do that anyway. But, which they should be, because, of course, whose money, it goes to the police. But either way, even if they were there as fast as they could get there, not fucking around, they're still not going to be able to stop anything. Really, the main purpose of the police, now I'm not saying every single time, but the majority of the time, it's just common sense. The main purpose of the police is to go and find people and lock them up, whether they're guilty or not. But go find someone who we can pin it on. And I'm not saying they go out looking for someone to pin it on, but I'm saying they need to solve the crime. The pressure's on them to solve a crime. They don't need outstanding murders where they haven't been solved. So they're more about solving. There's more incentive for them to solve a crime, even if the person's innocent, than to not solve it. So, which is terrible. But that's, I mean, they're there after the fact. They're not there to protect and serve or any of that. And this whole shit that even Obama had said, I thank the police who, of course, keep us all safe. No, the police don't keep me safe at all. The police actually make me feel not safe. And that's where I don't do anything illegal neither. And not that I talk about it if I did, but I actually don't. And, I'm just a person who goes to work every day and then does a show at night. I mean, I don't have time to get caught up in illegal shit. But, unless they want to call me what I say and my criticisms illegal, or, I guess they could do that. But with the exception of my speech, I don't do much. I don't do much of anything except, there's a lot of work in this show, and I've talked about that. It's not just preparing for the show and doing outlines and then putting the time in on air, and I have a full-time job that pays me as well. There's doing the website, trying to write articles, trying to post articles. That's why you probably haven't seen a lot of posts in a while. All of those things that factor into this. And I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that, that's where all my time goes. And then any extra time goes to spending time with my fiance, or just relaxing and trying to get some extra sleep, or trying to get errands or clean the house, things like that. So anyway, my point being is that, but yeah, if I see a cop, I wouldn't say it makes me nervous because, that's what they want, but I don't want to be around them. I don't want to be anywhere near them. They can create a crime out of nothing, and that's what we won't even get into that, but we will get into that on Friday when we talk about the making of a murder and the injustice system, the making of a murder series. But anyways, going back to the response times, they're not going to get there in time. So especially with women, I feel like women that live alone should all have a gun. And they talked about the AR-15. This fucking idiot Joe Biden, said, "Oh, get yourself a shotgun." And I think there was some story after that somebody got a shotgun, cocked it, and like blew out their roof or something. But I think an AR-15, to be honest, is a perfect weapon for a woman to have because it's light, it doesn't have a lot of recoil, and I don't think most women would have any problem shooting it. And then if you have multiple attackers, not only that, but it's going to scare people off. They think of these, like Piers Morgan's question would always be, why do you need an AR-15? Well, first of all, what about multiple attackers? People forget about this. What if 5 or 6 people break into your house and you have a fucking wheel gun, a revolver that holds five shots? You better be pretty good. There was an incident where a woman shot the guy 5 times and it still didn't kill him. Luckily, he left, but there's been a lot of stories about people getting shot multiple times, depending on the caliber, usually 22s, but you never know. And if there's multiple people that break into your house, and something like an AR-15 that has a 30-round clip and that can probably shoot fast enough to take out that many people. Now, not with everybody. I mean, somebody might get to you, but if you know what you're doing and approach it in the right way. But there are situations that they are needed for when it comes to protection. But going back to because I started to get into this and then went totally off point, but about the stats being irrelevant. So the stats to me are irrelevant because I think they do sway in the direction of gun owners or people that support guns, but they're still irrelevant because the point being is that you have a government armed to the teeth, every agency. You have police with tanks and automatic weapons and all of these things. And I think, and I've said this, I think a check and balance should be that the people have what the police have. Because to me, that's a check and balance. That's why I'm starting to believe in militias. Not that I was ever against militias. They just seemed, the interviews I seen with people from militias, they just seemed kind of, I mean, this was years ago. They seemed kind of strange, the militias that they interviewed. And I think they did that on purpose. And then in the 90s, you had some of the militias more, the racist Nazi militias, not all of them, but there was a big movement of Nazi militias that wanted to take over the government and implement, Nazism, which don't worry, because that's pretty much what the government is doing on its own. But if you have a militia whose sole purpose is self-defense from the government, I don't see a problem with that. I think that's a positive thing. And I don't know why the government would have a problem with that. Well, I do, in the sense that they want to be able to do whatever they want. So the police can get away with whatever they want with whatever they want in the system. We know that they're never held accountable, or maybe 1% of the time, if that, probably less. So what is wrong with a militia being able to defend themselves? And I'm only talking about self-defense. I'm not talking about anybody just attacking someone or hurting someone or anything like that. And I totally do not believe in that at all. I don't believe in these people that want to take over the government or go to war with the government or go to war with the police. And obviously no one's gone to war with the police, because 42 police officers were killed in shootings, and that is down from 2014. And that is not a lot in itself. So it's crazy how, you know, when things happen to the police, or people say, and really what happened was people just saying stuff about police and having more, you know, accusing them of what they were actually doing, and they flip out because it's okay for them. But when they do something wrong, a lot of things wrong, it's okay. So, meaning that, you know, the police do a bunch of things wrong, and somebody says something and they freak out. And a person does nothing wrong and is, you know, beat up or shot by the police, and they're supposed to shut up. So the people are supposed to shut up. The police, it's okay. So they get offended by any little thing. They're little babies sitting there fucking crying over it. But the point is that the reason for having guns still goes down to defending yourself against the government. And even if it's not about using it, it's just the whole idea of having it. It's deterrence. It really is. Because if everybody's armed in one area, they're going to think twice before just doing what they did in Boston. Now, in Boston, they all know that nobody's armed. They don't let people have guns in Boston for the most part. I knew one guy, and this was in like 1994, who had a revolver, and he was like, I had to get he became friends with a cop. He had to get a cop to sponsor him, and he worked at a liquor store in like the ghetto in a bad part of Boston, and that's how he got his gun. So it is very hard to get a gun. They started making it even harder, and I don't even know what it is now because I haven't lived there in 15 years. So I don't know what the gun laws are now, but they're probably even stricter, because they used to have this thing you had to get called like an FID card just for rifles. And I knew one of my friends had actually got a rifle, but then you had to renew it every 5 years as well. And it's just, it's crazy. And if you want to call that, you know, actually having a Second Amendment, I don't know that that's what I call it. So you do have states, a lot of them, that are totally anti-gun. And then, of course, you have states like Nevada and Arizona, New Hampshire. Texas is kind of weird because you cannot open carry a handgun in Texas. So that's just a little weird to me. I don't know. Even Vermont, you don't even have to require a permit to conceal carry. The only states I'm aware of is Vermont and Arizona, where you don't need any kind of documentation to conceal carry. But you have states that are very strict, and it's very hard to get guns in. But that's not good enough for people, because then they say, well, they can drive to this state and buy guns and then bring them back. Well, what about countries? Now, I know that Canada, I think, has stricter gun laws than the U.S., as does Mexico. But what if they changed their laws and they totally got rid of gun laws? Now, I don't think the United States would ever let that happen. But then what are you going to do then? Because it borders, it would be harder, I guess, to get it over the border. But if Canada changed their gun laws or whatever, or in Mexico, I'm sure you could illegally get a gun pretty easily, from what I hear. But because from what I understand, there's places where you can go and get drugs as well, that it's not hard to find illegal things there, basically. But either way, I mean, if states have the rights that they're supposed to have via the Constitution, then it shouldn't make a difference. If you want to make your state virtually impossible to get guns, although that would violate the Constitution, but that's not good enough. It's okay, well, we also have to get this on a federal level. But I think the ultimate plan, because as I said, I believe that it's about controlling every aspect of your life. And every dictator and anybody else who wanted to control a population took away the guns first. And I think that's eventually where it's going to go. Now, I know Obama says, no, we don't want to take away your guns. And I've heard people even say, well, he's not saying he wants to take away your guns. Oh, okay, then that must mean that he doesn't want to then. Because just because a politician says something, now you're supposed to believe it. So it's like they'll take one step at a time, and they pretty much have admitted that. And even that clip that I played, but even before that, they were talking about another assault weapons ban, and they're doing other little things like they lead bullets and not being able to import AK-47s from Russia. That would only affect, AK-47s made in Russia. But any little thing that can decrease the amount of gun owners. And then you also have this database. And, well, we'll get into that when we get into his proposed executive orders, because I'm going to go through those as well. But just because somebody says, and it's not just him, I mean, he's gone in a year. You have Congress, you have Nancy Pelosi, not Pelosi, the other one who looks like a old wrinkled witch. I can't think of her name. Dianne Feinstein, who even said that she would have everybody turn their guns in. I mean, just because Obama says, well, I don't want to take guns away, although I don't believe him, of course, but if you're believing politicians at this point in the history of the United States, then you're nuts. I don't know why you'd believe a politician ever. You're talking about people you don't even know that need something from you, a vote, and that supposedly they're going to tell you the truth. I mean, how many people that have gotten elected have said things and then not done them? or said they're not going to do something and done it. So, and to me, it seems like now politicians don't care as much because I think they realize that things are rigged, where they have an attitude that, whatever, I don't have to fucking talk to you. I don't have to do an interview if I don't want to. I don't have to do this. I don't have to fucking answer your questions, because I think it's more rigged than it's ever been, and it's going to keep heading in that direction. And the hardest thing, I think, for the government to do that is part of their overall plan, and I'm not even saying it's the government's plan per se, it's whoever the powers, we'll call them the powers that be, whether it be corporations or billionaires or whatever. The hardest thing for them to do, that I think is a big part of their plan to control every aspect of everyone's lives, is getting guns away from people. That is the hardest thing. So they obviously have to lay as much groundwork as possible. And they have changed people's opinions. I said at the beginning how so many people want background checks. I don't know how accurate that poll was that they said something like 90%. And I don't know about that. And that may have changed since then. But that a lot of people that are gun owners and are members of the NRA, and I'm a member of the NRA and Gun Owners of America, that they support background checks. I do not support background checks. I do not support any stopping anyone from getting a gun. I don't even support, this whole, because I don't support this in general, licensing of businesses. So if you have a license, if you go and do all the paperwork and this and that, and you actually get a license to be a gun dealer, which who knows what fucking hoops you have to jump through to do that. If you don't do that and sell guns and get caught, you're probably going, and when I say sell guns, I'm talking about, I'm not talking about selling a couple to like your neighbor or something. I'm talking about people that are basically like a gun store, but they aren't licensed. You're going to jail for a long time. So with any other business, you'd still, I think you'd get a fine, but I don't think you get charged with it. I guess it depends on the business. But most businesses, you probably just get a fine for not having whatever permits. And of course, all these permits, what are they for? Well, it's so the government can get money. It's more extortion. It's, well, if you want a business, you got to pay money. You got to pay us the money to, well, you got to register your business and you got to get this permit and that permit and that permit. Well, why? Well, because, we have to inspect this and we have to make sure you're doing this and we have to whatever. No, we have to make sure that we get a bunch of money. But I know a lot of people would disagree with me on this. I don't believe in any restrictions on guns. I believe that you're able to possess whatever you want to possess. And somebody made a statement about Chris Christie, and it just happened to be because this was in New Jersey, and I guess he voted against it. And I particularly like Chris Christie. I think he's an ass, and I think he's stupid as well, because he's made some ignorant statements about spying, and where he's like, well, you tell the widows of, 9/11 that we're not going to have the Patriot Act or something like that, when he was saying stuff about Rand Paul. But there was something where he didn't ban something, and people said, well, this is how they presented the story. I believe it was Rachel Maddow, of course, that, an 18-year-old can go and buy a 50 caliber rifle that can do such and such damage. Now, what Rachel Maddow, of course, didn't mention is that a 50 caliber brand new is like $30,000. So I don't know if it was about changing the age to 21 or something. I don't know. But most 18-year-olds are not going to have $20,000 or $30,000 anyway to buy a 50 caliber gun. And it was just a total misrepresentation because of that. Because, there's just dangerous weapon and 18-year-olds can buy them. Yeah, they can buy them if they can somehow, one, get $30,000 in the first place. And if they get $30,000 and they want to spend it on a 50 caliber gun, unless they're really rich, but at the same time, I don't think their parents would give them $30,000 to waste on a gun. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break. I have plenty of clips to play. If you'd like to call in, you can call in at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. You can also Skype in as well. Nonpartisan Liberty for All is the username. Just send a contact request and your name, where you're Skyping from, and what you want to talk about. And also, if you forget any of that, just go to nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. I think that's easy to remember. The name of the show, nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, and all that information is on the website, along with some old archives, some archives from February to April or something like that, as well as articles. I'm starting to add more articles, and I just wrote one this week about Making of a Murderer and the injustice system. Although, like I said, it's more of an op-ed where I more give my opinion than write just an article about facts, because it's kind of like the show. Again, discussing things and giving my opinion on them. So we'll be right back after this. Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Don't let Obama be successful when it comes to starting civil unrest and riots in this country. They will use that as a civil emergency to bring in a type of soft martial law like Europe has done after they brought in all the jihadis and allowed them to attack. The stage is set for classical martial law in the United States. George Soros, who's overthrown many other countries using similar divide and conquer tactics, is on record funding Black Lives Matter and other groups, and the mainstream media is trying to exacerbate tension in local communities. And out of this crisis, they intend to bring in the, quote, Strong Cities UN initiative that globalizes, internationalizes local government. It's political correctness intimidating people to submit to this international takeover. Now, it's been known for a long time, and it's come out in federal court, that many of the militias, though they're constitutional and made up of great people, end up getting infiltrated and led in many cases by federal provocateur, or even worse, by foundation provocateurs like the Southern Poverty Law Center that ran Elohim City, where the reported Oklahoma City bombing got hatched, which we know was an inside job, major false flag. 2016 is here, ladies and gentlemen. It is already the 4th. And all hell is breaking loose in the stock market, militarily overseas, so many issues. And the establishment is going to want a political diversion here in America. And they've been putting out the talking points that white terrorists are about to start attacking, that white terrorists are about to be involved in insurrection, while pushing the military, pushing veterans, pushing citizens of all race, colors, and creeds with more and more federal occupation, more and more federal tyranny. So let's be clear. And we're about to go in here and show you some of the articles here in a moment. The Bundys and others have very legitimate issues with the federal power grab over land outside of law, and people doing controlled burns and being called arsonists and people being charged. The federal government is power grabbing everywhere. It's true. It's lawless. It's shutting down power plants outside of law. It's opening borders outside of law. It's funding ISIS and Al-Qaeda outside of law. But all that's coming out. And the establishment is in political trouble right now. So they want to overturn the chessboard right now. We need Americans to realize we're all being played off against each other, and to watch the weaponized media on MSNBC and other places absolutely promoting race war in this country is out of control. That's why I'm here in Phoenix, and I'll tell you later in the broadcast, David Knight will, who I'm interviewing, a key individual to hopefully work with to try to calm tensions, to try to bring America together if it's possible. I mean, that's how serious the situation is that I'm working around the clock. I know a lot of people that are good inside the Pentagon that are working around the clock, good people in the Secret Service, but good people at the grassroots level of every race, color, and creed, liberal, conservative, libertarian, Muslim, you name it, who understand the larger globalist program for destabilization. We all have differences. We all have real beefs with each other. Nothing's perfect. Okay, and America has a lot of problems, but the globalists want to use those problems to basically bring it down into a truly fascistic system of total control. Let's go inside and look at some of these articles. Right here. CNN to provide an hour of airtime to Obama's gun control pitch today. Town hall, full pitch, and what it's really about is executive power outside of law. Then the even more hardcore gun control, I predict, is coming after this, but this is unprecedented. The Hammonds, excellent article by Kurt Nimmo, targeted because government wants to steal their land. The entire story by Kurt Nimmo of how they stole the land, how they're stealing other people's land, how it's criminal, how it's wrong, how they've persecuted them. Absolutely, they've been wronged. Absolutely. My issue is the timing of this now allows the whole debate to not be about the gun grab, to not be about all the gun control, to not be about the victim disarmament, but to be about citizens with guns taking over buildings. It's an empty wildlife refuge building. The feds are grabbing everybody's property in the area. They're the ones with armed force out of control. But again, it's the federal government, not even the feds on the ground that are the problem. It's the whole UN Agenda 21. But read that article, you'll understand it. Then the other perspective. People are asking on InfoWars, well, why are you pro-Bundy and then anti-Bundy? We're not. We're showing both sides. And Paul Watts has written an article that's on drudgereport.com. Oregon standoff could boost Obama's gun control push. I started saying this yesterday. As soon as we had the news early in the morning, this had started Saturday night. Kurt Nimmo had already written about it Saturday night. And obviously, by the time I looked it up, they were already blaming the Second Amendment. It's obvious. It's the timing of this, okay? Plus, the Hammonds say they don't want the Bundys there. That's another problem. It was the grazing rights of the Bundys in southern Nevada. That's why we supported them. They were in the right completely, okay? Continuing. Liberal media tweets call for National Guard cops to confront the wildlife refuge occupiers. Many liberals want Waco-style response to government. They want them killed. See, it's all about race war. These are the Soros White House operatives already trying to make this racial when it has nothing to do with race. We're literally walking into their trap, and you know there's provocateurs there on the ground, probably not even from the FBI, but from the big foundations, just like we exposed Hal Turner and others. So continuing, the article is up on Infowars.com. You want the real breakdown of what's happening, there it is. Continuing, you heard this. This is the talking point just a few weeks ago. MSNBC, white terrorists, not San Bernardino terrorists, not Islamic terrorists, white terrorists are the problem.
But yet, you look at the data of white men with guns wreaking havoc on this country. Why aren't white men all coming forward? Why don't you call on them to do that?
Boom. So it's all white men. They're the ones wreaking havoc, even though statistically it's one of the lowest crime rates out there. Meanwhile, radical Muslims invade churches, throwing Christians out and beating them up in Germany. Articles, mainstream news, linked in the article, Infowars.com. So that's what's really unfolding here. And then meanwhile, they want to distract from coming after our guns. They want to distract from the stock market plunging 450 plus points. They want to distract from all the things that are happening with this, quote, armed takeover that's happening. The FBI says they seek a peaceful end. Armed group vows to stay at Oregon refuge.
Welcome back to Close Up. Presidential hopeful Republican Rand Paul has been critical of government intrusion into Americans' private lives, as well as what he views as violations of the Constitution. And he includes the recent executive action by President Obama to expand gun background checks among them. WMUR's Sean McDonald sat down with Senator Paul this past week to get his take.
And we are here with Senator Rand Paul. First of all, I want to say thank you for being here. I know it's a very busy time on the campaign for you.
Glad to be with you.
Let's talk about some of the big issues of the week, if we could. President Obama, first of all, talking about taking an executive order, executive action to expand background checks. What do you make of the announcement, and is this the right thing to do?
Well, if he were here today, I'd try to familiarize him with something we call the Constitution. The Constitution says laws are supposed to be written by Congress, not the president. So I think he's acting unconstitutionally, and when I'm back in Washington, I'll do everything I can to stop him. In fact, I have legislation that will defund this executive order and say that no money will be provided for it. And it's not the way our government was intended to be run. It was supposed to be run where Congress, which is close to the people and elected every 2 years, is supposed to write the laws. The legislature writes the laws, not the president.
It seems like we've heard about so many mass shootings out there. The president talked about a few of those. What would you do as president to curb some of this violence? What can't be done?
I think we're all frustrated by it. You know, I have kids, and I can't imagine dropping them off at school and them being shot at school. So I think we're all emotionally affected by it and would like to find answers. I think gun control, though, really hasn't worked to stop them. In many of these cases, the guns have been bought legally and with background checks. California has the most strict gun control laws in the whole country, and yet those guns were bought legally, and still the shootings happen. One thing that's common to the shootings is it tends to be, most of the mass shootings have been teenage, white, male, mentally troubled, and then they tend to go to places that are defenseless. One thing we could do is try to ensure that schools are defended, and make an announcement to the country that if you're coming into a school, it will be defended. That means allowing concealed carry in school for teachers and administrators when available and possible, having armed security guards. But one of the things that protects people's houses is people put up signs saying security, alarm. So when people see something like that, they tend not to go there. And the one thing that hasn't happened, we haven't seen any mass killing at police stations or sheriff stations, because they know they'll be opposed if they try to shoot anyone there.
Is there a worry, though, if you bring guns into a school that you could create more violence that way?
Well, only if you think the teachers are going to be shooting each other. I'm not talking about having the students be armed. I'm talking about the teachers being armed. And when possible, if we've got the money, armed security guards. We already have that in some schools. I mean, a lot of high schools across the country have an armed policeman in there, unfortunately. But I think having an awareness to people who want to perpetrate crime that they're going to oppose, it does act as a deterrent.
Do you think, as part of the solution, it would be more background checks, expanded background checks, I should say?
We already have background checks. If you want to go buy a gun, you get a background check. 95% of the guns, maybe 98% of the guns are bought that way. There's no real evidence that they're unregistered guns that are committing these acts. The acts, most of them, the mass shootings, have been done with legally purchased guns that had background checks. Most criminal affairs, though, are actually done through illegal purchase of guns. So people think, well, we'll just have more gun control and we won't have any more crime. Well, criminals don't really care too much about fines. And if it's a suicide bomber, a lot of times they're not going to be committing any more crimes. They don't care too much about the penalty. And a lot of times suicide bombers, it's their first attempt to do something, because the background check doesn't work for them either. I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm just saying there's not an easy solution, and that we shouldn't easily give up our Second Amendment. And by all means, we shouldn't let President Obama do something that's unconstitutional. And I think it is. It's illegal and unconstitutional what he's trying to do. do.
Let's talk a little bit about the campaign. We're in the final weeks of this before Iowa and New Hampshire. You've lagged in some of the polls out there. Donald Trump has done very well in these polls. How do you stand out in this crowd? How do you make up ground in these last weeks?
You know, I think I'm the only fiscal conservative in the race. I'm the only one that's willing to balance the budget by holding the line on spending, on all spending. Many people on the right say, oh, we got to dramatically increase military spending. But that bankrupts us just as much as those on the left who want to increase welfare spending. In fact, the real problem in Washington is the right wants military spending, the left wants welfare spending, and they get together and we spend more on everything, and the taxpayer's stuck with the bill. I've introduced 3 individual budgets that balance the budget within 5 years. A lot of Republicans give lip service. They say, well, I'm for a balanced budget amendment. They'll vote for a balanced budget amendment, but then when you actually give them a budget that balances, they won't actually vote for it. So I think I am the fiscal conservative in the race. I'm also somebody who believes in privacy, that the government shouldn't be collecting your records. And I think I also stand out because I'm just not eager to get involved in another war in the Middle East. I just don't think that there is an end to the war in the Middle East, and I'm not willing to send our young men and women back over there.
Do you think, are you worried that some of the supporters of Donald Trump out there are making a statement against sitting politicians, against Congress? You've heard this before. You are a senator. You worry that that's going to impact...
I have a lot of complaints about the way Washington works also. That's why I ran for office, because I was upset with Republicans not doing their job. I'm upset that Republicans sided with President Obama and raised the debt ceiling. I'm upset that Republicans put a $1.1 trillion spending bill, 2,000 pages long, and no one read it. I'm just as upset as anyone else. The difference between myself and Trump is that I am a committed conservative, a constitutionalist, and I think he is a narcissist who has no real philosophy other than believe in me and give me power and I'll make things better. I think we'll be alarmed if people succumb to that. I also think voters are smarter than that, and I think eventually, when push comes to shove and people vote, I think we're going to find out that, you know what, the polls have been wildly inaccurate.
We'll find out, I guess, on the 9th. Speaking of which, how important is the New Hampshire primary to your campaign?
You know, very important. We've spent a lot of time up here. We've done a lot of town halls. We, talked to individual voters on the street. We've really worked it hard up here. We have a lot of volunteers in Manchester making phone calls for us. We actually have the largest leadership list of anybody running for president in New Hampshire. We have over 500 people on our leadership list. This is something that candidates have traditionally done, is gather their leadership together. And we have more on our leadership list than any other candidates. We think we're going to surprise people.
And one of the things that we pride ourselves in New Hampshire, you can go up to these candidates, you can talk with them. What are you hearing from the people out there about what they want changed, what they want to see in Washington?
Most of the thing that I hear from Republicans is that, you know what, we elected you guys to stand up to the president and to stand up to spending and debt, and now the spending and the debt continues, even though Republicans control the House and the Senate. So I think they want us to do more, and that's why I've been quite outspoken at saying how unhappy I am with Republicans who have gone along with the president to increase the debt.
Really quickly, let's go international here. You talked about not wanting to police too many situations. How do we defeat ISIS when so much of it is going on overseas?
The first thing we should do is quit arming them. We've been putting in arms to the allies of ISIS for years now in Syria. You still have people on both sides of the aisle, Hillary Clinton on one side and Rubio on the other, saying they want to topple Assad. The problem with toppling Assad is who would take over Syria then? I think ISIS. So I think really we have to think through the situation. Is regime change a good idea? I think regime change in the Middle East has led things to be worse. Toppling Hussein, the Iraq War, I think was a mistake. We still have chaos in Iraq. Iraq's now allied with Iran and Russia. Syria, if we topple Assad, who takes over? Probably radical Islamist. Libya, Hillary Clinton was a cheerleader for getting rid of Gaddafi, and now Libya is a failed state. A third of Libya pledges allegiance to ISIS. So I think we have to have a spirited debate, and people have to decide, do you want a candidate who is going to go in and we're going to spend the rest of our lives fighting in the Middle East to try to make the Middle East like us? Or do you want someone who would defend?
Nonpartisan liberty for all. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in. Username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
And we are back. That last clip was Rand Paul, who actually mentioned introducing a bill to not fund the things Obama wants to do. So I'm going to talk about those momentarily. There were a couple other things I wanted to get into first. And then I wanted to play, I was going to say Janet Napolitano. No, Judge Napolitano analyzing what he has, his executive orders, because some of them are actually orders that he can legally sign based on, again, executive orders. I don't know where they got those from anyway, supposedly from the General Welfare Clause, but they were supposed to be only for executing other laws and things like that. But I guess technically a couple of things that he did were inside those parameters. So we'll talk about that as well. But I wanted to mention that you have all these people that want to blame gun manufacturers. And if I have time, I'll play the clip from the Young Turks, who just all they bring up is gun manufacturers. So they bring up, oh, people have to get reelected, and they're scared of the gun lobby, the gun manufacturers, the lobby of that, essentially saying that they can't get elected without the gun manufacturers, and that the gun manufacturers are the ones pushing this, and the gun manufacturers are the ones pushing the NRA, and that they just want to sell all these guns, and it's ridiculous because, first of all, the NRA has over 4 million members. Now, to join the NRA, even at a reduced price, I think membership is $35 regular membership, but if you get, a couple years, you can even get lifetime memberships. I don't know how many people get those, but you can get a couple years at a reduced price or something. So even if we average of those members, because people give money too, members will give money, but even if we say that each member gives $20, and that would be a reduced membership, and not counting all of the money that people give, and I've given like $50 here and there, it comes out to $100 million a year. So there's $100 million a year that goes to the NRA that is from people. That's my estimate, but I would say that's minimum. I would say that more money actually goes to the NRA than that, especially with what's going on. So this whole business that it's all gun manufacturers. Now, I don't necessarily think that gun manufacturers care what guns they're selling. Yes, they care that they're profitable, but this whole thing like, that everything to do with guns, all of these laws and all of these things, how can you blame it on gun manufacturers when there's 300 million guns that have been purchased by people? So to say that, and then obviously people are buying guns, people support guns, people support gun rights. So you have all that data. And then, of course, you have Gun Owners of America, where I don't think they technically, you have to pay a membership fee, but to become a member initially, I think it's $20, but they asked for $20 for membership. So, I gave them $20 for 2016. But this idea that it's the gun manufacturers, and maybe I'll play a little of this, is ridiculous because it goes against, I think the number was something like 65 million people own guns, and then there's 300 million guns that are out there. So if you have that many people that support gun ownership, and like I said, the NRA alone, is pulling in at least 100 million at least. And then they have banquets and stuff like that. I saw where, it's like $100 ticket for a banquet, and they're pulling in. Now, I'm not saying that the gun manufacturers don't give them money. I'm sure they do, but they may be making more money from their supporters, the actual people that support them, than the gun manufacturers themselves, or at least the same amount. So that, that whole idea is ridiculous in my opinion. And to manipulate or try to manipulate the public into thinking, oh yeah, it's these evil gun manufacturers, they're the ones. Now, nobody does this really to a lot of other industries except, banking. But gun manufacturers, they're the evil ones. They're the ones controlling the gun laws and all of this stuff. Well, what happened when they had the assault weapons ban? And again, they even mentioned that the gun manufacturers want people to illegally own guns, even though I don't know how they make money off that, and that they want all this gun violence to go on because somehow that's more money for them. I don't know how. And this is the type of propaganda and bullshit that this supposed independent, show that I don't know if they say they believe in freedom. They definitely don't show that. So I believe this might be the clip. Let me try to find it real quick.
In San Bernardino. In that case, 14 people killed and 21 injured.
Yeah, here you go.
Now, whether it was Muslim fundamentalists who did it in San Bernardino, as it looks like it was,
this is it,
and a Christian fundamentalist who did it in the Planned Parenthood shooting, as it looks like it was, or it's just a random crazy guy in Virginia Tech or Aurora, Colorado, or Sandy Hook, you name it, they all have access to weaponry, and the shootings keep on going. Did you know that yesterday, as the San Bernardino shooting was happening, there was another mass shooting
that's
in
not
Savannah, Georgia?
Yeah, that's not the clip that I was looking for. That's another clip from them. So I may not. I thought I got that clip, but I guess I don't have it. But what it was, and it might be better that I don't because they're just frustrating anyway. But I've seen other people do this. Obama does it too in his speeches. They all blame the gun manufacturers and forget. It's like blaming the drug dealers that there's drugs on the streets, not looking at the fact that the reason why there are drug dealers is that there's a market, there are people who want to buy drugs. And that's similar, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's similar to guns, that people are buying guns. The gun manufacturers are not forcing people to buy guns. People are buying guns because they want to and because people like the president are scaring them, making them think that they're gonna take guns away, and they are based on what they're saying. Even when we get to the mental database, I mean, if you think of if you ever got medication for depression or something like that, are you going to be in that database? So there is a legitimate scare, and same with after Sandy Hook, and I actually bought a semi-automatic rifle because they were talking about banning assault weapons again. So, and I think the gun that I bought, they would have considered an assault weapon. So this whole idea of the gun manufacturers running everything and people being scared of the gun manufacturers. Now, if they want to talk about the NRA, that's one thing. But the NRA is supported by people. So if they want to talk about people maybe not getting reelected because of the NRA, okay, that's one thing. But not getting elected because of the gun manufacturers and the gun lobby and all that is, in my opinion, is a bunch of shit. It really is. Because again, it's, people are paying or giving all this money to the NRA and paying for memberships to the NRA. And if you look at gun manufacturers, again, most gun manufacturers make, with the exception of a few, like I think Arsenal, which is located in Las Vegas, all I've seen them have is AK-47s. So if they were to ban AK-47s, that would be a negative thing for them. But I don't think that they're big enough to have the money to spend all this money lobbying anybody. All the other gun manufacturers, or at least the big ones, they make all kinds of guns. So if they're selling, if one gun or a few guns were banned and then they were just selling more of another gun, I don't know that they're so eager to make sure, or that they, to say that they support basically crime, that people that getting guns that are going and committing crimes with them, I think is ridiculous. And then you had the whole thing where they were suing. They went, and in certain states, they actually banned the suing of gun manufacturers. But somebody would kill somebody with a gun, and they sue the gun manufacturer. How is that in any way the fault of the gun manufacturer, that how somebody uses a gun? It's crazy, and I don't see any other industry being treated like that. Do car companies get sued because somebody runs someone over with a car? It's ridiculous. And it goes to also, no one wants to blame the real issue here. Everyone wants to blame something else. Blame the gun manufacturer. Blame the people that sold it. Blame this, blame that. What about the person that committed the act? Aren't they responsible for what happened? When someone stabs somebody, they don't blame the knife company or the store that sold them the knife, or the knife manufacturer. Or if somebody kills someone in any other way, they're not blaming the manufacturer or the weapon used, because the weapon used is irrelevant. It's when it comes to guns, they have brainwashed people, I believe, into looking more at, the fault, the issue is that this person was able to get a gun. That's the problem. Like that kid that killed 6 people and 3 of them he killed with a knife. That doesn't matter though. But they're saying their whole thing is that, well, it's that they were killed with a gun. Never mind the gun is responsible. And how did they get the gun? And that's the issue, that they were killed with a gun. If they were killed with something else, then it's a whole different story. And as far as anyone that is shot, because of course there are a lot of people that are shot as well, to me that's the equivalent of somebody getting stabbed and not dying as well, because looking at it as, okay, they got shot but they didn't die, what's the difference between that and they got stabbed and they didn't die? Nothing. So that's why, as far as the people that are shot, I don't even, factor that in, because that's not that I don't factor it in as someone being shot, but it's somebody being injured, whether they're injured with a knife or whatever. But the shit is getting insane that you blame a gun and how the person got the gun and that guns exist for an action that a person takes on their own. And at least 30% of this 8,000, and that's just an estimate based on looking at some statistics, are by gangs anyway. And that's not counting crimes, but just gangs themselves. So in that case, the majority of those guns obviously are going to be gotten illegally. Now they're going to say, well, the people that bought it might have bought it legally and sold it to them, or might have, and all this shit. And they don't know that for a fact. And guns, they're not even keeping in mind that, just like drugs, guns exist in other places and get imported into the United States the same way that drugs do. And those can go to people that sell guns and distribute them. So this whole idea that like all guns come from other states or people that buy them at a gun show or something like that, that somehow buy mass guns at a gun show, it's not happening. But when you have the president going on TV and you have government media and you have just the demonization of guns for so long, that's why this is a long-term thing, and they know it is. But the goal in the end is to disarm everybody. So only the government has guns. And then what are you going to do then? Cops illegally selling guns, maybe to make some extra money? No one thinks of that. Or government agents. So it also is going to be already a deterrent for people to, seek mental health or go to the doctor in general. And I think that's with Obamacare too, because everything is in a database. But let me go through, I guess, the actions that they're taking. And first, let me play Judge Napolitano talking about it.
So what do you make of it?
Well, some of what the president did is well within his authority. Can he hire more FBI agents? Yes. Can he dedicate more discretionary funds to mental health issues? Yes. Can he broaden the database of information that is accessed when doing background checks? Yes. But the most significant thing he has attempted to do, or will attempt to do when he signs an executive order later today, is to create a new crime by saying that if you sell as few as 2 guns or transfer as a gift as few as 2 guns, you are a dealer. and you therefore need a federal license. And if you transfer the guns as a gift without a federal license, you can be prosecuted. Why is that troublesome?
Right.
Because Congress 3 times rejected that proposal. So he is attempting to rewrite laws. Look, if he doesn't like the gun laws, he can argue to people, get your representatives to change them, but he can't change them on his own.
Okay, let's look at the number of criminal weapon convictions over the years, because he talked today about federal law, but there are laws that are already on the books that apparently are not being used, because when you look back in time, look at this. In the fiscal year 2015, there were 6,002 criminal weapons convictions, but they're down 5.8% from last year. They're down 15.5% from 5 years ago. They're down 34.8% from 10 years ago. And then in an anomaly, they're up a whole bunch from 20 years ago.
Okay, one of the things that he also promised to do today was to enforce federal gun laws. Gretchen, that is not newsworthy. It should not be newsworthy. His job has been to enforce federal gun laws since January 20th, 2009.
Right. Why would people be against dealers reporting lost or stolen firearms?
I don't know that people are against it, but it is very important the way laws are written in this country. They can only be written by the Congress. They cannot be written by the president. Many people may favor his proposals. He claims that the polls show that even gun owners favor his proposals. And I'm not in a position to dispute that, but of course you can find polls to support anything. But under our system, his job is not to take a poll and then decide what laws he's going to write. His job is to enforce the laws that Congress has written.
But every president does executive orders, executive actions, hundreds of them.
Yes.
So what will stop him? Will the courts stop him with it?
If he attempts to prosecute someone, if his Justice Department attempts to prosecute someone who failed to register as a dealer because they gave a gun to their nephew, that person and that person's lawyer will challenge the prosecution, and presumably this regulation that he came up with on his own will be invalidated by the courts.
Real quickly, the next president in office can wipe this out.
Absolutely. The next president, he or she could ignore it or could rescind it.
All right. Judge, thank you much.
You're welcome.
So that was Judge Andrew Napolitano. He used to have his own show on Fox. He was on Jeff Berwick's show once, and he kind of claimed to be he didn't say he was an anarchist, but he is more than just what I would call a establishment libertarian. So, but anyway, he's just he's giving his opinion on what the law is. And after listening to that and looking at these orders, I agree with him on most of them. And of course, I'm not a judge, so he would have more information than I would have anyway, first of all. But first was universal background checks. So I would say that's changing the law. And I think that's what he said as well, because he was saying that, prosecuting somebody for giving a gun to a relative or I think he used like a nephew or something. So that I think he agreed with, and I would say that as well, because he's changing it from, okay, right now you only need a background check if you're a federal licensed dealer, but I'm going to change it with an executive order and pass a law that says, hey, everybody needs to have a background check no matter what. And that was in the bill, I believe, that failed in April of 2013. So that kind of shows that, all right, it was in this bill to pass through Congress, and Congress didn't pass it, so I'm just going to write it on my own now. So, and that's a criminal law. So the president cannot make his own criminal laws. So that's definitely something that he cannot do, that he does not have the right to do. Pretty much, I mean, we're at the point where, this is one thing I agree with Mark Levin on, who I can't stand. The Constitution is that he says we're in a post-constitutional, or was it Glenn Beck who said that? Somebody said we live in a post-constitutional world. And we do, but it's like we always did. And also, I feel that the Constitution doesn't give you true freedom and liberty anyway. So look at it how you want. But I don't know how long the Constitution was followed, if at all. One of the other parts was hiring 200 new ATF agents. So that, as I think Napolitano said as well, he has the right to hire ATF agents. And that I would totally agree with. If they're part of the executive branch, he's their boss. It really has nothing to do with guns per se if you hire well, it does. It's to track guns and where they came from, but he has the right to hire them to do that. So that's something that, as Rand Paul said, they can challenge to fund it and not fund it, but he can hire new ATF agents. And that's something I think they don't even need an executive order for, I would think. He could just say, hey, and maybe that's how they do that, but I would think that any agency falls under the president. Now he needs Congress to agree to fund it, and that's the so-called check and balance, which there really isn't. I did a show on that, I think, last week. But yeah, I think he is able to hire people for these agencies that fall under the executive branch, but Congress has to fund them and agree to fund them. So I don't think there's anything wrong. Well, I mean, of course, I think there's something wrong with the whole fucking government. But I mean, if I'm looking at this the way Napolitano was looking at this, which is, that's what I'm doing, is I'm looking at it from does he have a right to do this? I would say yes, based on the fucked up laws of the United States, that he has the right to hire some more ATF agents. Now, taking away, this is what I'm calling it, but taking away privacy rights so doctors give more gun information to the gun database, and having Health and Human Services making it easier for them to do it, and stopping states from putting up barriers. Now, technically, I think the way things are written, that I guess that would be something that he could do. I don't know, because the way they created departments, they let departments do whatever they want. So you have the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, to stop the states from putting up barriers, though, however, that could be a Health and Human Services law, because the way they are able to, these agencies that have been created, there was a bill, and I don't remember what year, I think the 40s or the 60s or somewhere, the rulemaking bill, maybe it was even before that, where these agencies can pretty much make their own laws. That's pretty much what it is. And what he's doing is saying Health and Human Services, stop the states from putting up any barriers. So I don't think that a president should have a right to do that, nor should I think Health and Human Services should have the right to do that. However, under the, again, fucked up government, I believe that they do, because you're talking about a government agency and he's directing a government agency to do something. As far as investing in gun safety technology, which is another action, that would be Congress. He can write, I guess, an executive order to invest in stuff. and it goes into more detail than the notes I have. But they had brought up the bracelet and the fingerprints and things like that. Now, that's another thing that Congress will have to approve that. But as far as asking to invest in it, because I think that's more of a asking to invest. So I'm not really sure what the precedent has been when a president signs an executive order to invest in something. It seems like, again, you need Congress to pass that, but I don't know if that's even, it's not really creating any type of law. It's just, I want to fund this. So I would say that would be a quote unquote legal executive order and then go to Congress to fund it. But Congress could say, no, we're not going to fund this. Requiring the shell corps or there was another word used, basically corporations that they buy guns under a corporation or something and they're not getting background checks. To me, that would fall under the same thing as universal background checks. You're passing a law, you're passing a criminal law, and you can't just do that with an executive action. And I believe the last one, I may have missed one, because he mentioned a couple other ones, and they didn't seem to. The one that I know he mentioned that I don't think got finalized was the people on the list, the anti-terror list or the no-fly list, not being able to buy guns. I don't think that got on there, and I think that didn't get on there for a reason. Now, I could be mistaken, but I don't believe that got on there, because that's crazy. That just means with no due process, you could say, hey, you can't have a gun. And I think what they're trying to do is whatever they can to minimize the amount of people in the U.S. that can buy a gun. So whatever they can do. Now, the other side of it is there's so many people that have guns anyway that unless they want to start trying to and this is bullshit, because he mentioned this about going and confiscating guns. He mentioned how would we do that, or someone asked a question, how would we do that? Well, the same fucking way you do anything. You look at each area has a police department that is over that area. The same way you go and look for people with warrants. I mean, what is the difference? There isn't one. And they've done it in California and New York. So that was just an asinine question and answer from Obama, because I think he agreed with that. But that, I believe, did not get on there, which it shouldn't, because the first thing you could do is file a lawsuit, because there's no due process. You should be able to file a lawsuit once you can't get on a plane, because they base it off of what? They can just put your fucking name on there. They could put my name on there because they could say, well, based on his radio show, he says this and he says that. I mean, I'm not big enough that, probably many people even fucking know, but they could say that based off of what I say, they don't believe I should have a gun or whatever. I don't know. But there's no due process there. I mean, all of this is ridiculous in the sense that this is a right. And if you're going to take away someone's right, you should have to do that in a court of law. Now, not that it's going to make a fucking difference, because the judges will go along with anything. But unless it's something where they have a law that, okay, if you're a felon, although I don't agree with this, but if you're a felon, you can't have a gun, or if you're you have a domestic violence charge or something like that. The other thing was increased mental health funding, and that, again, the same thing. I'm sure he can do an executive order on it, and then he'll have to get funding from Congress. But that's where I mentioned earlier, who's going to go to seek mental health help when they know it's going to be put in a database? So what they're doing is, there used to be a law that protected your medical records. That no longer exists because there's a database now over Obamacare, and it even says in the Obamacare bill that your medical records can be viewed. Now, of course, they want more medical records submitted to this database. And that's crazy. And you're talking about an issue that is not an epidemic, that there are plenty of issues that are a lot worse. And if you look at the ratio to people that are saved compared to people that are killed, even though they want to ignore it, there's definitely a lot more people that whose lives are saved. They don't want to track that. Because why would they? On the last show I did regarding guns, I played a clip from Stefan Molyneux, and he went through all of these statistics and everything. One of the ones was that suicide, when England banned guns, suicide didn't change, and I wouldn't think it would. The other thing was that the percentage of deaths per year, not deaths with an F, but deaths per year. So there's something like 2.5 million, and I'm basing that off like a 2012 number, but I don't know that has changed all that much. But it's not even 0.5%. I don't even know how to say this number, but it's like 32, I think, hundredths. So let me think if that would be one, or tenths. It's 32 tenths of all deaths are by guns. And then that's counting by homicides, not the suicides, but 32 tenths of a percent, if I'm even getting that right. Because it's basically, if you were not looking at it as a percent, it'd be 0.0032. So I think that's actually 32 tenths. So, because it's not even a percent. So when you look at that, you also look at, and let me play this clip real quick while I have 5 minutes. This is Chris Kyle's widow. Not that I'm a fan of Chris Kyle, because I'm not, but hopefully I have this. I know I had it on my list of downloads, but she had, no, maybe I don't have it, where, let me actually go and see where this is, because I know I had it and maybe it didn't get transferred over. But she had asked a pretty good question. It's not there. And had a pretty good point there. Oh, then I must have it. Shit. I'm going to get to it because it's actually a good point. Again, although I'm not a fan of Chris Kyle, and I think basically he was a murderer. I'm sorry, but that would be my opinion. But here, let me just make sure this is it before here we go. So she asked Obama question.
I want to open this up to people in our audience.
Absolutely.
A lot of people have traveled far. I want you to meet Taya Kyle. She's the widow of Chris Kyle, former Navy SEAL, author of American Sniper. Taya wrote a book, American Wife, a memoir of love, war, faith, and renewal. Taya, we're happy you're here. What do you want to ask the president?
No, I appreciate you taking the time to come here. And I think that your message of hope is something I agree with, and I think it's great. And I think that by creating new laws, you do give people hope. The thing is that the laws that we create don't stop these horrific things from happening, right? And that's a very tough pill to swallow.
Right.
We want to think that we can make a law and people will follow it. But by the very nature of their crime, they're not following it. By the very nature of looking at the people who hurt our loved ones here, I don't know that any of them would have been stopped by the background check. And yet, I crave that desire for hope, too. And so I think part of it, we have to recognize that we cannot outlaw murder, because the people who are murdering, right, they're breaking the law, but they also don't have a moral code that we have. And so they could do the same amount of damage with a pipe bomb. The problem is that they want to murder. And I'm wondering why it wouldn't be a better use of our time to give people hope in a different way. To say, you know what? First of all, actually, let me back up to that, because with the laws, I know that at least at last I heard, the federal prosecution of gun crimes was like 40%. And what I mean by that is that there are people lying on these forms already and we're not prosecuting them. So there's an issue there, right? Mm-hmm. But instead, if we can give people hope and say that also during this time, while you've been president, we are at the lowest murder rate in our country, all-time low of murders. We're at an all-time high of gun ownership, right? I'm not necessarily saying that the two are correlated, but what I'm saying is that we're at an all-time low for a murder rate. That's a big deal. And yet I think most of us in this country feel like it could happen at any moment. It could happen to any of us at any time. And I'm almost finished. Just when you talk about the NRA and after a mass shooting that gun sales go up, I would argue that it's not necessarily that I think somebody's going to come take my gun from me, but I want the hope, and the hope that I have the right to protect myself, that I don't end up to be one of these families, that I have the freedom to carry whatever weapon I feel I need, just like your wife said on that farm road. You know, the sheriffs aren't going to get to my house either. And I understand that background checks aren't necessarily going to stop me from getting a gun, but I also know that they wouldn't have stopped any of the people here in this room from killing, and so it seems like almost a false sense of hope. So why not celebrate where we are? I guess that's my real question, is celebrate that we're good people, and 99.9% of us are never going to kill anyone.
Well, let me make a couple of points. First of all, thanks to your husband for his service, and thank you for your service, because extraordinary heroism that he and your family have shown in protecting all of us, and I'm very grateful for that. Number two, what you said about murder rates and violent crime generally is something that we don't celebrate enough. The fact of the matter is that
see, and he even admits that the murder rates have been going way down, but you know that doesn't matter because he's going after guns. That's part of his agenda. That's part of what is being told, and that's what people that want to take over and control everything you do. That's what they want to do. They want to disarm you. So that's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We will be back tomorrow. So I hope you join us, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. Thanks, everybody.